Hey, good morning, everyone. It's Eric Leigh, mortgage lender and branch manager at Guaranteed Rate in Meridian, Idaho. And happy early birthday, America, 4th of July weekend 2022. I wanted to come and check in with you a little bit because as we start the third quarter and the second half of the year, things in the news and mass media are about to get a little ugly. And I'm not even going political on everybody here. I know we've got midterm elections in the not too distant future. But what I'm going to talk to you about is something that I think is happening right now. And I don't have the data or the evidence to show it. But we're going to talk about an economic recession. So, first of all, what is an economic recession? Recession. Now, if you want to take what the most normal textbook definition of that is, it's two consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. Basically, GDP or gross domestic product is just a combination of all of the activity, goods, services, things that are produced in an economy, and it's measured in a quarter. So, again, that textbook definition that most people will go from is two consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. If we go back to the first quarter, January 1st through March 31st, it was a negative number. Now, we just ended the second quarter, but because of the timelines on how that data is aggregated and then reported, we don't get to know about that here for 2 or 3 weeks' time. We will get a preliminary reading in July. We will get a revised reading in August, and then the official reading sometime after that. But I'm telling you what I think. And again, this is not what I know. I'm telling you that I think right now we are in a recession. Because if you're somebody who purchases gasoline to drive a car, or if you eat, and that means you have to go out to get food at the grocery store, you know things are expensive right now, right? And it doesn't feel like it's getting any better. Gas prices, although they've come down a little bit lately, they still seem like they're pretty high. Food prices, still pretty high. So that's like a permanent and ongoing tax on every consumer in the country. And if you think about what that means, everything that we do the most with and spend the most money on, food and energy, that also includes electric bills or in the winter, colder months, heating bills. That food and energy costs, those things are really expensive right now. And because we're paying more money for those things, it means that we have less disposable income to go buy other things. In fact, I've been taking a real informal survey of all of my mortgage clients and just asking them about their spending habits. A, because I'm morbidly curious, but B, it really does affect the housing market in which I work in. So, in my random survey, which again, not scientific at all, just polling clients and prospects and realtors that I work with and talk to, most people are still planning to go out and take vacations. Sorry about that. Like, this is going to be one of the most widely traveled weekends. I think AAA is expecting to have more people driving or traveling somewhere for vacation this weekend than in a long time. Okay. So, outside of vacations and travel, it seems like just about everything else is on the chopping block. So, my theory there is like pandemic restrictions, you can't take trips anywhere, lockdowns, all those things that we remember, we remember all too well, unfortunately. Most people aren't willing to compromise those trips. They're wanting to get out, they're wanting to get out and travel. It's just something they want to do to make up for lost time. But everything else seems to be kind of on the chopping block as something that would get cut. I know that my own family, like we cut our car wash memberships out of the budget. We decided to cancel a few of our streaming platforms. I mean, we're tightening our belts just like everybody else is. And I think that's a common theme. So, getting back to the recession, if we're in a recession right now, and again, my guess is that we're not going to see that until later in July and then the revised reading in August. But the thing that I really worry about, especially with the housing market and the economy in general, is that once the media starts to get a hold of those first readings, you've got to believe and understand the media needs eyeballs. The media needs you to read their articles. If it bleeds, it leads. And the negative press around this is going to be ugly. I think it's going to even be worse when we get later into the fall and we're really ramping up for the midterm elections when all of the candidates for each, office and elections that are out are using this to try to leverage against their opponent in order to win an election. I just think it's going to be bad. So if you think about what kind of things happen in a recession, it's less spending by consumers, which means there is a pullback, right? Or a negative, potentially negative number for the total economy performance. When that starts to happen, companies whose sales are impacted because we're not spending as much money, companies' sales come down, revenues come down, they have to start cutting costs. Sometimes that means layoffs. Okay. And as the media starts to spin all of this, it almost becomes a self fulfilling prophecy. This negative downward spiral of, hey, things are pretty bad, right? If it bleeds, it leads, all the negative headlines. And then all of a sudden, we really start to see people pulling back. But what I'm here to tell you is that most recessions, and you can go back to post World War II and look at all of the recessions combined, the average length of a recession is about 11 months. Now, I will say that if you're going to go back earlier before World War II, there were a lot more recessions then that were a lot longer. And if you take the average age over that longer period of time, I think the average recession was closer to 2 years or 2.5 years or something. But I do know that from World War II moving forward, if you measure the length of all of the recessions in months, average them out, it's about 11 months. If that's true, and we're getting ready to have an average garden variety run of the mill recession, we're halfway through it already. And we're halfway through it before you're really going to start to hear all of the negative stuff happening. Okay. So, the other thing I want you to think about too is the impact of inflation. We talked about the food and energy. I mean, everybody who buys food, and I know you all do, right? We're feeling it. We're feeling it every single time we gas up our car, every time we go to the grocery store. All of that stuff is just expensive. There's a decent chance that we've probably hit pretty close, if not to the top of where these costs are going to go. Now, I'm not saying that things can't get a little bit worse. There is a chance that they will, but we're probably through the worst of it right now. So the effects that you're feeling right now when you gas up and when you buy food and all those things, although they could get a little bit worse, they're probably not going to get significantly worse if we're halfway through this recession and the supply chain disruptions and all of these things that we've heard about for so many years with the pandemic and post pandemic, that stuff is probably going to work itself out a little bit sooner than later. Now, again, I don't know that. I'm not saying this is my official forecast, but I'm looking at history and I'm looking at how long average recessions last. So, if we're halfway through a recession, the average recession being 11 months, things will probably start getting a little bit better, but probably won't start feeling much worse. Why am I sharing all this with you? There are a lot of people that are putting off purchasing a home right now because of these fears. Because when they read things that the news and mass media are going to start throwing out on headlines, it erodes at their confidence. It erodes at their willingness to spend money. And when that starts to become, like I said, a self perpetuating downward spiral, because if it bleeds, it leads, and all of a sudden it must be bad. So we have to really prepare and we have to really act and do the things because it's bad. We're maybe already halfway through it. So, the thing I want people to remember about housing is one of the ultimate hedges against inflation. Now, we have had periods in the past of housing where we've seen housing values drop, for sure. But on average, if you go back, and I'm in the Boise, Idaho area, but I know that the trend and the average nationwide is pretty similar. The average year over year appreciation for a home, average, is somewhere between 3 and 4%. Some other areas higher, obviously. Some areas may be a little bit lower, but a nationwide average, a home appreciates at 3 to 4% every single year on average without fail. Compare that to rent. And those of you that are renting apartments or renting single family homes or condos in the downtown where you live or something like that, the thing I want you to keep an eye on and watch is the pace of your rent increases. We've been seeing rent in my area increasing by over 5% year to date, like way, way higher than average. Because again, there is a lack of inventory and a lot of people that need housing. Because if you think about it just quite simply, you cannot opt out of housing. You have to live somewhere, right? So, although housing prices are higher, and although mortgage rates have come up and are higher, rents are also moving higher and moving higher quickly. So, about the only way I know to say it to my clients and even prospects that I'm talking to that are thinking about buying a home is, which is the best of the bads? Think about that for a minute. Which is the best of the bads? Rising rent where you have nothing to show for it, or higher house prices, higher mortgage rates with payments that are higher than rent, although you do have something to show for it. So, home ownership, I think, has a good return as long as you can commit to a home for 10 years. Now, I don't want to sit here and say that you can't buy a home today and in 5 years sell it and make a profit. I'm never going to say that. That could quite possibly happen. But if I take the worst housing downturn that we've ever seen, and it was the Great Recession housing crash that started in 2008, that period from the peak of where median home prices were in Boise, my area, the peak to the bottom to the recovery where we were at the same point took 10 years. And I'm not even saying that I think that we're going to experience something like that in a recession like we did last time. I quite frankly do not think we're going to experience that. But if you wanted to use that as the plan and use that 10-year window as the measure, if you were to buy a home now, commit to holding it for 10 years, I can practically guarantee, and nobody can 100% guarantee, but because of history and because of average home price appreciation, I can practically guarantee to you that you are going to be just fine because 10 years is such a long window. Keep in mind, in contrast to buying something and trying to sell in 2 or 3 years, that's just not long enough to mitigate the risk that a housing decline, a housing correction could cause to you. 10 years is pretty safe. If this is interesting to you, or if you know of somebody who is interested in purchasing a home, or just wants to talk about a mortgage, or just wants to talk about recessions and what that means for housing and mortgage rates, I'm absolutely happy to help and have those conversations. When I'm done with this stream, I'm going to put my contact information for you in the comments down below, and feel free to reach out to me, hopefully after the 4th of July weekend, because full disclosure, I'm actually getting ready to go on a camping trip with my family. But please feel free to reach out to me, shoot me an email, send me a private message on this social media platform that you're watching it. I'd love to have those conversations with you to help clarify any questions or concerns you have about the economy or about how housing in particular is going to perform during this time. Again, my name's Eric Leigh. Thanks so much for watching today, and we'll look forward to coming back and talking to you soon. Thanks again. Happy birthday, America. Have a nice, safe holiday weekend, everyone.